Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Mishal Saeed, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and really the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we're thrilled to have Philip Chipping, the founder and CEO of Operation Read, joining us. Philip brings over 20 years of entrepreneurial experience, really having founded Zag, where he invented the invisible shield and scaled it to $10 million in revenue, and no wonder, a literacy-focused venture. Now with Operation Read, he's revolutionizing how struggling and dyslexic readers experience books through the patent-pending Divvy Reading platform. We'll explore his founding story, how Operation Read is transforming literacy, and really his vision for scaling this impactful ed tech business. So let's dive in. Philip, welcome to Founders Future.
Sounds great. Wow, that was quite the intro. Thank you.
Absolutely. We wanted to make sure that we shined your background and accomplishments there. Yeah, let's kick things off for the listeners. Take us back to the beginning. What specific problem was it within the literacy or educational landscape, perhaps around, readers that are struggling or learning inaccessibility that inspired you to start Operation Read?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. My very first love in life was story and reading. My grandpa and my dad telling me bedtime stories, and then just finding books, discovering the public library, and I would spend so much time there. And so when I had kids, I have four kids,
Mhm.
and I discovered that my oldest was really struggling with reading, and she had a reading disability. I kind of said to myself, no child of mine is not going to know how to read. Now, I didn't go to school for education. I didn't know how to teach reading other than, what I remembered from my own experience with, Sesame Street and blending the words together and whatnot. But no, I dove in. And at the same time, I was publishing collections of short stories for children and like bedtime stories through No Wonder Publishing. And then I found out that my second child had reading disabilities and struggles. And then we found out that my third child did. And so it just sucked me in deep into this world that I wanted every child to be able to know the wonder, to know the joy of reading and of story. And it's just become a huge passion for me, wanting to help every child. And the more I got into that, the deeper I got, the more I found a really inherent problem in the way reading is taught
Mhm.
versus how reading is practiced. And so that's where Divvy came from, was trying to solve that problem.
Wow. I mean, the fact that, you leveraged a lot of your personal, experiences with that with your own kids and now you're paying it forward, there's a purpose behind everything, right? I love this. Now, I want to get into the nuts and bolts for our listeners, even, potential clients that may be tuning in once this episode does air. Would love for you to walk us through really how Operation Read generates revenue today. What's the core offer, and who do you typically like to work with? And how do you structure what you do for some of those clients, the parents, the educators, or even some of the schools?
Yeah, no, great questions. And I'll just be super upfront. Operation Read is very new. And in fact, we've been in beta MVP stage with our app. And so we're just barely coming out of that. But the roadmap, the plan is very similar to what we did with Zag. When I started Zag, I was nobody.
Mm.
And the Invisible Shield was a piece of film that required moisture to go on it. No big box store was going to touch us.
Yeah.
Similarly, today, trying to go directly to schools and school districts with a brand new software is kind of like the big box, the Best Buy. You're not going to necessarily get into those immediately. And so, what I did then is I went to all the mom and pop stores, just one-off stores. Just as an individual entrepreneur, I could talk one-on-one with another entrepreneur.
Right.
Similarly, here now we're beginning with direct to consumer, direct to tutors of struggling readers, where the kind of the rubber meets the road. And as we grow, we'll then get into private schools and charter schools, and then eventually we'll step up into the public schools.
Mhm.
Every every step up requires more development, more tech, more security, all of the things. And we'll just take it step by step as we go. But yeah, that's kind of the plan for market penetration. Just first kind of B2C and then over time B2S for schools.
Yeah, love that. Now, you probably already thought a little bit about customer journey as well. What does that look like, for someone who does get on the platform, right? Where do they usually start? What's like that day one state? And then by the time they're, done, really with that implementation and learning a little bit about utilizing the features and like resources, what does success look like if you can like map that out and paint the picture for some of the listeners tuning in?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, every parent of a child who's struggling with reading wants to know where their child is at and how can we help the child at home. Presumably, you hope the child is being taught at school, but with struggling and dyslexic readers, practice looks very different at home. And so the very first thing we do is we have the child and the parent together go through an assessment to help pinpoint the child's reading skill level. And then that correlates with where they begin practicing reading on our platform. And our platform is unique in that rather than having pre-prescribed do this lesson or do this, we have a whole world of content that the child can choose from based on their interests. And then
Right.
we're able to modify that content based on their individual skill level. And so we do the assessment, we invite them to find content that they want to read, that they're interested in learning about, and then they apply the filters to customize the content to their individual skill level. And then together with a parent or with a tutor or with an older sibling or teacher, they can engage with the content that matches their interest level, that matches their IQ, but practicing on their skill level. And so for us, success looks like they take the assessment, they find content, and then they practice reading for 20 to 30 minutes every day.
Love that. Yeah, so a lot of user engagement from what it sounds like, a lot of just like the that self-serve aspect, which kind of helps with scaling as well as you start to think about that as like a founder essentially. Now,
Yeah.
really with acquisition, you would love to learn a little bit about, how you're bringing awareness for Operation Read. What are some of those channels in which, you're acquiring some of your customers or looking to acquire some of your customers right now, whether it's LinkedIn, word of mouth referrals, doing some paid advertising. How are you
Yeah.
thinking about, or how are you currently driving leads through the door?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And honestly, right now, we're not driving a lot of leads yet because we're still in that discovery phase. I like Steve Blank's definition of a business or of a startup. A startup is an organization in search of a scalable business model, right? And so we are discovering that customer acquisition process and which things are going to work best. We feel like we're getting pretty good on the messaging and we'll be able to start turning on some paid advertising. I think will be big and easy for us, but that's relative. We're competing with a low price product against some very high priced products that can afford to spend a lot more on the same paid ads. So that's where we'll have a challenge. But in the meantime, right now, yes, LinkedIn heavily connecting with tutors one-on-one, just kind of more manual right now.
Yeah.
But there are, anytime I learned early on, anytime you can plug into a group of people who have a common interest that they're very passionate about, that you plug into that group, and it's a lot easier to market to that group. So for Zag in the early days, the very first group we plugged into, again, it was a film with a moisture application. So we weren't even sure if we could really put that on cell phones, but we knew we could put it on GPS devices. So I targeted a group, and this is very applicable to what we're doing now, which is why I bring it up. We targeted a group of GPS users on geocaching.com. super, very proactive, hyperactive community on geocaching.com using their GPS devices every day. Similarly, now we're finding groups online of literacy experts. So decoding dyslexia, the Reading League. These are national organizations with state chapters that are very proactive in engaging in schools, engaging in communities. We also have created our own community event called ReadAthon, and we are hosting ReadAthon, kind of a readathon event with prizes, but we're hosting these in public libraries and community centers, and we're getting small local communities engaged. And then we offer free screenings. We believe there's three pillars to helping kids learn how to read. We have to do early screenings, we have to do early and appropriate intervention, and then we have to make the practice of reading fun. And Divvy really helps on that third one, but we're also helping address the first two. We do screenings, we give advice and guidance on at-home interventions and curricula, and then we get them engaged with the practice of reading. So those are some of the ways that we're finding customers through existing organizations, through our own events, and then eventually, yes, through scalable paid advertising and whatnot online.
Yeah, 100%. So it's really nice to hear that, you're looking at some of the more scalable aspects with ads. Now, as you're trying to get your messaging out there and really kind of prepare for that actual launch, what are you looking at in terms of like more of that automated outreach? Because you said some of it right now is, manual. What are some
Yeah.
of the systems that you're exploring more like strategically to automate your outreach so that, your lead gen can be more predictable on that side? How are you navigating that?
Yeah, great question. You know, I've it's been a long time. It's been a few years since I've used a CRM. So
Yeah.
we just started using Go High Level as a
Mhm.
CRM. There's 100 or 1,000 CRMs out there. What I'm finding most challenging is just having good support to help train me quickly on the CRM because I don't want to spend a ton of time learning another software. But a good CRM with autoresponder emails built in, with trickle email campaigns set up, that's going to be a real big key for us. I have
Mhm.
recently found a tool that I've been playing with called GMass, GMASS, which lets you email people directly from your Google email.
Yeah.
So the open rate is way higher because it just looks like an email that came from your personal Google email, but you can email 1,000 people at a time. So I really like the idea of that, and I've
Mhm.
just started toying with it. But yeah, I think email autoresponders, I haven't started getting into all of the text marketing, but I'm very interested in the text marketing
Yeah.
and really just a really comprehensive CRM. I would say those are my foundational fundamental pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also like from a workflow perspective, how can you start to, like you said, create more of like those automated sequences for nurturing, anyone who comes through
Yeah.
the process, so that they are engaged, right? Because this is product-led growth from what it sounds like. Now,
Yeah.
I'd love to learn about, your approach to sales. What are some of those strategies that you're exploring or have explored, to really just convert some of those leads that do come in into actual long-term clients for Operation Read, whether that
Yeah.
is through partnerships, marketing, referrals, some of the events you guys are doing. And are you doing this on your own or do you have a sales team in place also having these conversations?
Yeah, no, you're asking a lot of questions that we're in the process of figuring out. And so we are transitioning more into a sales model right now. And so we're still trying to figure out all the conversion points and what we can do to improve each conversion point. I do have two or three people that are working with me. So even online, what we'll offer as a lead in, as a lead capture or lead gen, is to do free screenings with people. And then we'll after the screening, we'll talk to them about where their child's at. We'll talk to them about strategies for moving forward, helping them find a curriculum for at home. But then we transition to the importance of practicing reading. And so that's where Divvy really comes in.
Mhm.
And so that's where we are starting to convert people into sales. And then just offering, creating some urgency, offering a discount if you sign up in the next 2 weeks, offering a free trial for 10 days, and then a discount, to get them on board. So that's kind of our sales process right now. How well it works, where the sticking points are, that's what we're in the process of figuring out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big thing is especially as you're starting to launch, gathering a lot of that feedback from some of those, early adopters is probably going to be very critical to ensuring that there is like stickiness with the platform and that you're iterating
Yeah.
as well as you go in terms of functionalities, features, what's working, and then also from a UI perspective, right? What's
Oh, yeah,
there.
absolutely. A
So
lot of work to be done, especially when you just have an MVP and you've just tested the core functionality, and now we have to make a product that is market ready.
yeah, 100%. And finding the right perspectives, finding those experts as well to kind of help in that process is probably going to be essential,
Yep,
figure
absolutely.
that out. Now,
Yeah.
it sounds like, your growth has been incredible. I mean, really with everything that you've done in the past and even now with like really starting up, the launch for Operation Read, if there was like a bottleneck that stood out, what would it be? Is it, even attracting like some of the right types of leads, some of those schools, some of those parents, some of the, those
Yeah.
ICP fits or, increasing maybe the conversions as well? What are you most
Yeah.
focused on solving so that you can keep the momentum going and hit some of those targets going into 2025?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, we want to be we want to be high touch. We want to be really supportive. This is not just a product that, like Netflix, where you just sell it
Yeah.
and people engage or they don't. You obviously want people to engage, but it's just
Yeah.
more entertainment. This is their child's future, you know. And so we really want parents to feel that we have their best interest at heart. And we
Mhm.
want to give them a deep level of support. But how do you
Mhm.
scale that? How do you make it possible to give everybody that kind of attention and support? That I think is going to be the challenge for us. I think we will be able to get a lot of leads. So I think really for us, you know, I envision having, I don't know, 10, 20, 100 videos that
Mhm.
answer different questions that try to just be really granular in the trainings and giving parents, because most of the questions are the same.
Yeah.
From state to state, the legislature or the legal landscape might be a little bit different, but by and large, all the answers are the same. So I think that's going to be the bottleneck is trying to get all of those pieces in place and then just having a way to present it that's not overwhelming, that's very well organized,
Mhm.
that a parent can start diving in and easily find the help and the support they need at any time. So we have a lot of documents. Right now like I said, we're doing this more manually. So we're taking more time on the phone or over Google Meeting with different customers, but that's going to be hard to scale. We need to make this more consumable but through video trainings, I imagine.
Yeah. So from what it sounds like, how do we actually productize this in a way to where this is actually going to be packaged and scalable and doesn't require
Yeah.
necessarily too much on the fulfillment side and really
Yeah.
create a strong offer as like you guys are, from what it sounds like, competing as well with, other direct competitors that might be a little bit more established. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, in terms of like really your vision now, right, for 2025, like what's top
Mhm.
of mind, in terms of some of those performance targets, revenue targets, if you can share with the listeners, where you're
Yeah.
looking to
Yeah.
take Operation Read over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, over the next to 12 months, before we really start scaling, I have a favorite book And a favorite philosophy. I'm a huge fan of the lean startup methodology. And the lean startup methodology says you
Mm,
identify your assumptions, you test your assumptions, you nail it
mm,
before you scale it. And
mm,
so, really, that's my goal over the next 2 to 3 months is to really nail our customer acquisition and our messaging before we start scaling it. And then when I talk about scaling, we're probably not going to shoot for the moon right out of the gates. I will be happy in 6 to 12 months if I have 1,000 to 2,000 users, you know. Now, I would love to have more like 5 to 10,000 users, and I think that's realistic. I think that's what we'll probably shoot for. But before we start swinging for the fences, 50 or 100,000 or a million users, eventually my goal, the state of reading in America is horrendously bad.
yeah.
With 40 million kids in public education, 70% of them are below grade level and need extra help. And, really, I want to be helping millions of children every year.
Mm,
But from a scaling perspective, just all of the logistics and all of the challenges that come with that, I'll
mm,
be super happy to get 5 to 10,000 people because we're going to learn a lot this year just by bringing that many people on.
mm,
What marketing messaging is really resonating? Where are the sticking points? Where are the bottlenecks?
mm,
Um, like you said, how do we really productize this and create just a flow from beginning to end where they're not only using it, they're not only engaging, but they are seeing the results that they need. Their
mm.
children are improving in reading ability. That's our biggest goal.
Yeah, 100%. And then, once you have that process in place as to what are going to be, what's my offer to begin with? Because, if you have a strong offer, then the sales and the marketing components really kind of come together. But the way
Mhm.
we're going to really get our message out there to the audience, create a lot of that top of funnel awareness so that, you are positioned to, reach that goal. I love to hear it. This is so purposeful of what you're doing. And no, I'm super excited to see where you go, into this year as, you start to launch Operation Read and really scale. Now, one more question on this front and we'll wrap up. I want to really learn a little bit about how you see the ed tech and literacy industry evolving in the coming years. What's your perspective on that? Especially with, your focus on, more assertive reading technology. How is
Yeah.
Operation Read, planning to position itself for that type of future?
That's a very big question. So I'll try to give you the 5 minute version.
Sure.
There is a huge shift in the industry right now, moving away from some older curricula that were focused more on reading enjoyment than reading mechanics. The
Mm,
problem is they've been disproven scientifically, they've been shown to not be very effective. People were so engaged trying to get kids to enjoy reading that they actually weren't teaching kids how to read. So there's been a huge shift, huge pendulum swing to the other side called structured literacy,
mm,
to where people are focusing really deeply on the mechanics of reading, the science of reading, phonics, instruction. And now there's a lot of experts who are worried that they're focusing too much on phonics, too much on mechanics, too
mm,
much on rules. And Divi is really a way that we can address both because
mm,
really I believe there are two pillars, fundamental pillars to learning how to do any skill. You
mm.
have to learn the skill, you have
Yeah.
to learn at your level, but the more you enjoy it, the faster you'll learn it. And we see any skill where somebody really enjoys it versus some kid who's being forced to do it,
Mm,
there's going to be a big disparity in how fast they learn that skill.
mm,
And so Divvy is trying to help really revolutionize the reading industry by taking the science of reading, the mechanics, and marrying that with content that kids actually want to read, rather
mm,
than baby books, rather than things that make the kids feel dumb. They already feel dumb, but then teachers are handing them books that make them feel dumb because they're just far below their intellectual level. And so we're seeing a shift already. We're seeing a lot of people in the industry talk about we have to focus on more than just the mechanics. And so I think the timing for Divvy is phenomenal.
Yeah.
We're just kind of hitting that market right at a really lucky time and hope to be a really big contributing voice and partner in revolutionizing and showing that really we can bring the two together, skills and interest at the same time.
Absolutely. And I was just about to say that as well right now because, from what it sounds like, even as before you can penetrate in the market, you've done a bit of that like competitor analysis and you're seeing the gaps anyways, right? Between, really where students are at, lack of interest, with wanting to actually take part and bridging that. And I can tell that's, your unique differentiator, with Operation Read. And it'll put you in a really great position as you figure out productization and how you can start to get the messaging out there. Yeah.
I believe that that is so important. I teach my kids all the time the T principle because
Yeah.
I come from an artistic background and the top of the T is really interesting to me. I
Right.
want to learn something about everything,
Yeah.
but it's the diving deep and really understanding one industry and one industry well enough and deep enough that you start to gain insight into problems and
Mhm.
see solutions that you can address. So this is the one that I've chosen. I love kids and I love literacy.
Love that. Wow. I'm feeling so awe-inspired and really
Well,
excited
thank you.
excited for your mission as you start to impact the lives of millions of students. Very well said. Thank you so much, Peter Philip, for joining us today. That wraps up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. And really from founding Zag and now inventing and really scaling Operation Read, you're purposeful with everything you're doing, like I said, and you're on this mission to transform literacy for struggling and dyslexic readers with your platform. So we're excited to see how everything unravels going into this year. And hopefully we'll do a part two where we can catch up and find out
Sounds
about, what's working and, what's next, on your radar. So to our listeners,
sounds great. Thank you.
yeah, to our listeners, if you enjoyed the episode and would like to get in touch with Philip and learn a little bit more about, his mission, you can hit him up on LinkedIn. We'll link his profile below in the summary. And you can also subscribe to Founders Future, where you can listen to some more episodes from us and find some more resources and insights as well at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses scale and accelerate their growth through trained appointment setters and world-class sales and marketing systems. Until then, everyone, keep climbing, and we'll see you all on the next one.